Hello, my beautiful plant people. How are we today? For those of you that have never met me before, I am Sam from Plant Collector Melbourne, and today we have a really fun video. So currently it is like the 22nd of August. We've got a couple of days before spring and it is just around the corner. By the time that you guys get this video, happy springtime. It is a whole new growing season and I hope that you guys are as excited as I am. So for today's video, we are going to be talking about all things to get ready for the next growing season or spring care. Winter for me has gone so fast. I don't know about you guys, and I truly haven't really thought about what comes next in this year for growing season. So I have all my little notes on my phone as per usual, and I can't wait to share with you what my tips or my tricks for getting ready for the next growing season is. So let us begin. Also, I should definitely mention that now that it is going to be September, we are having a spring sale. So PCM, if you guys are in Melbourne and you guys are ready to start doing your spring care, spring repotting and everything like that, it is good to mention that very soon we are having a spring sale, particularly for care. Keep an eye out for that on Instagram on what dates, when that will be. I have a rough idea. It's probably going to be either the 2nd or 3rd week of September, so stay tuned. I'll also put maybe like a little, Leanne can help me out and put a little datey thing that tells you guys when it is, but I'm very excited. We're gonna get some new plants and let's just start fresh because winter was definitely the time of rest for you, for me, and the plants. And yeah, it is finally time, my friends. Let's go for the next growing season. So let us start. So what are the things that can prepare us for a great growing season? So one of them is assessing your collection. So now that it has been winter and now everything is about to pop off, just imagine your space now and think of all of the new leaves and the new plants that you guys are about to embark on for the next part of this chapter or this year. And one thing that we can totally do is to assess where we are at currently. So what plants spark joy, what plants struggled during the winter season, what needs a repot, what needs a chop, what wants to be propagated, what needs to go bye-bye or to sell off and give a new home. So one thing I will definitely be doing is I'll be going into the greenhouse, looking at my current collection and saying which of you spark the most joy for me and what I'm going to keep. And those ones I'm definitely going to repot and put new slow release fertilizer and invest my love into them for an amazing growing season so that they can grow big and strong. And some of the other ones that have struggled, what are we going to do with those? So are we going to sell them off or give them to friends? Are we going to cut back because the plant is really struggling and we just want to maybe try and salvage some things that are left? It's good to have a bit of an assessment and a direction of what you want to be putting your energy into for the next growing season. Also, really good thing to assess pest management, any fungal or bacterial stuff, your normal plant maintenance things. If you are an individual that doesn't necessarily like using pesticides, and that might be for multiple reasons, like you like more of the natural approach, or you've got kids or pets or sensitive skin and all of that jazz, for whatever reason, if you are not a fan of spraying pesticides, it is a great time to start releasing the natural predatory bugs. I've definitely done this in the past and I even have a past video on it. And I think that it is so great to do or use if one, you're outdoor, and two, that you don't have a really big infestation and they kind of control it overall and for a long period of time. So let's take an alocasia versus a philodendron. So philodendron like things that are very airy, that don't like to be too dense because they don't actually need that much water. Whereas let's say an alocasia or a colocasia, if you will, love their water. So they want something a bit more dense in their mix. So having different amendments prepared and ready to go has always been one of my top tips. But then also, not only do I have my amendments like separate at home, I've also got tubs that are pre-mixed with different ratios. So I might have one that's like a denser mix and that's pre-done already. And then in another really big tub, I'll have something that's like super airy mix. Or on top of that, to go one step further, I even have like a seedling mix versus an adult mix. So really the only difference for that is that the seedling mix is a little bit finer. So I say this on my channel all the time, is that the only things that I use are 3 things in my mix, which is orchiata bark, charcoal, and jumbo perlite. And the orchiata bark comes in different sizes. So the smaller, the finer, I tend to use for my seedlings. There is a medium grade, which is called classic, which I normally use for all like juvenile to adult. And then there's like the super chunky bark, which I like to use for things that are huge. So for example, this huge, beautiful monstera in the back, I don't know if you can see, that has really chunky stuff in there as well. So it might be tailored to the age of the plant as well. So for those of you that don't know, what I use for my personal collection and in the store is, of course, growth technology. And I use either Foliage Focus mixed with Rootzone, like a little cocktail, or I use CCS with Rootzone. So let me go grab those. And I have something a bit fun for you guys, so hold on. Okay, so just to show you guys, this is what I do. So I will either grab, like I said, Foliage Focus and CCS, and I will mix those in my watering can, or if it's more of like a juvenile, like either a propagation or a younger plant and I want to focus on the roots, I will do a bit of this, a cocktail in my watering can. And the exciting thing that I wanted to tell you about is that I thought long and hard of what I wanted to do for my YouTube fam. Because there is something so special about this community, and when you guys come into the store or you guys contact me and you say that you've watched my videos on YouTube or you've been here since the beginning of when I started the videos, I think it did go Instagram then YouTube, but YouTube's community is just something so incredibly special. So I wanted to say thank you to you guys, and I will be now giving you a code for all of Australia that if you guys want to use growth tech stuff, that you get 10% off, just because it's my way to say thank you very much for supporting me. So I will put it in the description. Leanne, if you can put it here for my beautiful YouTube fam to let you guys know of the code. It's going to be something like YouTube fam, something like that. But I will confirm and put it right here and down below in the description. But yes, so some people might ask, like, do I pre-mix all of this? And to that, I would say no, just because I have a feeling, particularly with the Rootzone, if that is left outside, whether it's hot or it gets contaminated or like it's just sitting there, I don't think it's very potent or efficient or pre-mixing your water and solutions. And if it stays in like a plastic container for a long period of time and is exposed to light, then it's not as effective as if you just mixed it fresh, in my opinion. So something that is bizarre to me is that people don't realize that when they buy plants from, let's say, Bunnings or another plant nursery or store, is that they put slow release fertilizer in it. And that can last anywhere between 3 to 12 months. And if you're lucky, and the people or the nurseries can use up to 24 months. That is if you're very lucky, because that fertilizer is quite expensive. But And once the plant uses it or the slow release fertilizer breaks down and it's depleted, you have to feed your plant. And some people don't realize that once that's depleted, that if you don't feed the plant will die. So in case someone needed to hear that, please make sure to feed your plants, especially during this growing season. Oh, what we can definitely discuss about is the dosage. So for example, for Foliage Focus, they use about 3 to 5 mils per liter if you're in like a soil or potting mix, and also 5 to 7 mil per liter if it's like a hydro situation or semi-hydro. This guy, I'm just going to speak about my favorite, of course, that you use it every watering and then once a month you kind of flush it out. But I do definitely know that some other fertilizers just say to do it once a month, but have a higher dilution. So for example, it could be like 10, 15, 20 mil. And the reason why I bring up the dosage is that because during winter, some people might dial it back if the plants are not growing as fast. So for example, if plants aren't really producing a lot of leaves fast, but they're still maybe a little bit growing, you can adjust it to maybe half strength. In spring, if your plants are going absolutely bonkers, and even this is probably in summer as well, when there is a lot of light, you can actually push the plants more and do bigger dilutions of your fertilizer. So I say that, take that with a grain of salt, because it is less risky to do less nutrients than if you do too much. So if you do too much, you will be burning the plant. But one of my favorite things that I hope that over your plant journey you will know is that once you know your plants and how they grow, and when they're at their peak of their optimum growth and when they're in their not so great growth or unhealthy, that you can adjust the fertilizer depending on its pattern of growth at that point. My main message is that in terms of fertilizing, please do fertilize during the growing season, but adjust to the plant's needs. So if it's going bonkers, go harder. If it's slowing down, go less. Pruning and trimming, of course. Now that it is coming out of winter, you probably have experienced either fungal, bacterial, or yellowing of leaves from overwatering, or just because it's been a bit too cold and the plants have been a bit too wet for too long. So feel free to prune and trim. Something really cool that I never really thought about, which is it's so funny that no one really thinks of this, but cutting and pruning back your plant is just as good for its health as if you chopped a tree outside or a flower or a bush back. I don't know why, but I think that indoor plant people forget that if you start to chop and get rid of the massive leaves, because there is such a big root system, it doesn't have to support as many leaves, that it just goes bonkers, that they'll have more growth points, or they'll be a lot more vigorous because that they've got a beautiful foundation of big roots, healthy roots. And yeah, so trimming back your plant actually does it some good. And not only that, but we can propagate, which is even better. So not only can you trim back a plant and that it will be healthier in the long run, but you can also propagate it and have multiple of that plant. So win-win. Although I totally get the idea of you want a really big plant, and so why would you chop it back? Yeah, it's definitely a debate. Like, I would never want to chop this huge Thai constellation because it is so big. But yeah, it would totally do it some favors if I did. Planting and transplanting. So when is the best time to do your repotting? And it is definitely now. Springtime, now that it's going to get warmer, we have more sun, that it is a brilliant time to repot now. And yes, you can do it later on in the season. You can do it when we're in summer. You can do it when we're in autumn. But I do think that spring gives it just a beautiful a refresh, just like us, just like in the beautiful seasons of our life, that spring is for growth. So giving it a fresh start and that it can last this beautiful period of growing season from the start. I did also put a tip for properly planting in terms of depth, space, and watering. So let's just talk about depth. So these are some great examples. This was a Crystallinum esqueleto from my previous video of my top 5 Anthurium in the store currently. I will link it up above if you haven't seen it. But this is a great example of how if I were to repot it, that I'd actually repot all the way up to here, just so that those aerial roots could take and be in soil. So when thinking about depth and repotting, it's quite important just because you want to maximize the amount of roots that are in the soil for them to grow, particularly all of the aerial roots. And then on top of that, it's also stability wise. So a plant like this, if it's not deep enough, it will definitely lean like so. So just thinking about depth, the composition of the soil, of course, or your mix. If you like, some people like to do slow release fertilizer, but I really and truly love my GT Foliage Focus, so I use that. Oh, and you can totally double plant stuff. So keep in mind that if you are doing something like a Philodendron Brazil, or I'm just thinking that lots of people really love lush plants. So I don't really find that for whatever reason, Anthurium collectors don't like to double, triple, quadruple plant. And I've always wondered why that is. But they don't want it to be super bushy, I guess. But if you're going to be double, triple, quadruple planting a plant, just to make sure that there's enough space so that all of them have enough space to grow their roots in. Essentially, what you don't want to do is have them so close to each other that they have to compete for root space. You want them to definitely have enough space. And pretty much the opposite of what I said in my winter care video, you are going to need to adjust watering based on the weather conditions. So in case that you needed the reminder is that during winter, I don't know about you guys, but here in Melbourne in the store, at home in the greenhouse, I'm probably watering either once a week or once every 2 weeks, just depending on the conditions and what the plants are in, like what media or if they're in tubs and whatnot. So, but now you're going to be increasing the frequency once again, and it is just totally a reminder that to keep an eye on the weather and picking up the plant's pots and seeing how dry, how fast drying they are going. So just adjusting to the new season, the new plant routine, I would say, or watering routine. I would also say that it is a great opportunity for some propagation. For those of you that have never really chopped up their plants, I totally encourage you to do so. It is really intimidating at first because you don't know exactly what you're doing, and there is a little bit of information on the internet. It is so much easier than what you guys think, and it just takes some time and some practice. I would say that if you're propagating for the first time, or if you're propagating with a new genus for the first time, that just to take it slow, do a propagation of a plant that you may not be super attached to if it were to die. Give yourself some grace as well if things do die, because if you've never done it before, how can you expect to be amazing and get 100% on the first go, right? So give yourself grace, be gentle with yourself if you are propagating for the first time. I would also say that start off with something that is easy, and that you won't mind if it were to kick the bucket per se. So easily, like your devil's ivy or your Philodendron Brazil, things like that. I definitely know that when I first started propagating Anthurium, I would freak out. It was so nerve-wracking, especially if I was cutting up something that I really loved, and I couldn't bear the idea of the mother plant dying and the cutting dying. For those of you that don't know, that when you do cut a plant, your practices aren't as sterile. It is so open to infection, so not sterilizing like your secateurs or a knife and whatnot. So yeah, there are definitely some really good practices that you can do. I can't say that I'm very sterile when I do my propagations, but it's totally one of the things as do as I say, but not what I do. So sterilizing your equipment, making sure that the plant is in a healthy condition before you cut it. For those of you that are trying to cut a anthurium, my biggest advice to you is to do what I like to call a bum cut. And that is when you have, so if you were to unpot a plant and you've got a big stem and we've got like all these roots coming out of the stem, is that you cut just a little bit off the bottom and you propagate that little bit, and then the top will be absolutely fine. And I've done that with so many of my plants, particularly anthurium, and they have been like very successful. I would say maybe like 70 to 80%. I've definitely lost a lot of Monstera. Actually, I should give you some tips on cutting Monstera as well. So if you guys are thinking about cutting like a variegated Monstera or just Monstera in general, I guess, because they are so prone to rot, I will give you a tip, and that is to cut or do a cutting. And in my experience, putting it in water is the fastest. And some of you will be like, what? I used to do it in sphagnum moss. Actually, to be fair, I think that the sphagnum moss is less chance of root rot, in my opinion, but it is higher in stem rot. So this is my tip to you guys, is that if you've got a cutting of a Monstera, putting the aerial root in a glass of water and keeping the stem or where it's cut out of the water. You can do some really crazy contraptions. I know that I did. I would like lay the cutting down horizontally, have the aerial root like just sitting in water, and that tend to be the best way. Because trust me when I say I have killed so many Monstera propagations in my life. I think it was 2 years ago. Yeah, winter 2 years ago, I cut up about 10, in between 10 and 15, I'm going to say 10 and 15 Borg, so variegated Bossagiana cuttings in winter. So that was my bad. Looking back at it, I was like, that is so silly. You should have done that in spring or summer. But anyway, and I lost all of them besides one. So learn from me and do your propagating mostly in the growing season, unless you have something like a grow tent or that your home is always heated and warm so that it doesn't have the chance of rot. So that pretty much summarizes what my suggestions or my tips and tricks for spring is. I hope you guys enjoyed it, or that it got you thinking about one thing or another for your personal collection and what you want to achieve this growing season. I would love to hear about all your tips and tricks of what you guys do around this time when we're converting from winter to spring, as well as just having a good old chat about any stories that you guys have, whether it's like propagating or repotting and things like that. So feel free to sound off in the comments and have a chat. Other than that, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys on my next video. Bye.